I'm very excited today to have on the program, both on the streaming side of it and also on the audio side of it later, Sam Sam Kukathas. How did I do?
Perfect. Yeah, no problem at all.
I ever get so nervous every time I go to say somebody's name and then I mess it up. I'm really excited about our conversation because it brings into a highlight what a lot of people who are sensitive would really connect with, and also just the dimension of sound. I mean, 20 years ago, when I was trying to understand how we could unleash our full potential in organizations and in humans, the research I did took me to understanding that sound was the thread that went through everything. I mean, black holes have a frequency, the earth has a frequency, nature has its own frequency, everything has that. And so when Sam came along to the octopus movement a little while ago and opened his voice, unleashed his voice with us, it was like, wow, this, thank goodness. So I'm really grateful to you for the work you're doing. And now I want to share it with this audience because there are people out there who are probably just simmering below optimal and aren't quite sure how to break through and do that. And we can always be better. I mean, this is the environment we're in, full of uncertainty, full of volatility, full of ambiguity, all those things. But it's a time for us to really step in and grow and be our best, in every shape and form. So, Sam, you've been on a journey. You've been an academic, and now you're doing this work, which is outstanding. How was that path? How did you end up here?
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much, Alana, for the introduction and for having me on the show.
Pleasure.
So the journey's been an interesting one. It's been the last 8 years that I've really been on this space. So what happened is essentially in 2017, I didn't get my doctorate at Oxford, and everything at that stage of my life was connected with being a philosopher, being an academic. I'll only be happy if I'm an academic. So there was a real crisis of identity that happened in this moment, but it was many years in the lead up to that where I was unhappy. I was dealing with grief for a friend who'd passed away. I was dealing with depression. I'd say, described myself as having a lifetime of identifying myself as an anxious person. I was shy. None of the things which are really present these days. So it was really a chance to find myself inside of a context called I don't like myself. And I'd got to a point where, I remember at its worst stage, I'd been on a balcony in central London where I was living at the time, and just looking down and considering jumping off, because thinking, well, then it would be easier. Then I would escape the shame and the feelings of judgment that I have on myself and the feeling of being a failure that was so present at that time in life. So I was grateful that my brother spent a couple of years just telling me I need to do this personal development program, and eventually I said, okay, I've got nothing to lose. I'm literally hitting rock bottom, so I did that, and so that journey started to open up a field where I was like, okay, this view of human nature that I've been writing about for so long, maybe it's not quite accurate. Maybe there's a different way of looking at things. And it flipped on its head the pessimist that I'd been from being a philosopher to an optimist again. So I really came back into my true self, if you like. And then over the next few years, I spent a lot of time engaging in transformational leadership and really discovering, oh, I actually really like this thing called leadership. I thought leadership was something which was associated with being a politician or being an authority. And I'd spent a lot of time writing about my critique of that. So I didn't really have much time for the idea of a leader. And when I discovered that that was not what leadership was, I was, first of all, relieved, but also clear that, okay, this is something I can actually do really well. And it's become just part of my nature is to be able to lead, to serve, to be able to give, to see in the moment what's going to make a difference for people. Like I literally just got off a call with someone where I just sensed in, and I could tell there was a little bit of vulnerability in their space, and so we just guided them through a space to deal with some of what was there at the level of the heart, and removing what felt like a dagger from their heart, so that they could connect with more unconditional love for themselves, which would then allow them to connect it with a deeper level of what they're actually up to in the world. So that's what it can look like, is just being in the moment and seeing what's needed in now, and that's, I guess, one of the skill sets. So that's where it started from. And then after I engaged in transformational leadership for a few years, I worked with someone who had impacted tens of millions of lives, and I worked hand in hand with them. And I both saw what worked about being in that organization as well as what really didn't. And I saw what was missing was love at its core. And I started to connect in with that during a psychedelic journey in 2022. And the message that came through was very clear. It said, Sam, you're here to heal all the bullshit in the world. And you can imagine someone doing snow angels in a room, guided, and just saying this very, very loudly over and over again. So the message wasn't just like oh yeah, that's what you're here to do. It was like, it was as loud as a message could ever be. And people go through these journeys and they can choose to listen in all sorts of different ways. And at least with me, I listened from, okay, well, perhaps this means that I'm a healer. So I followed that instinct. And from following that instinct, an email arrived in my inbox within a week or so, which basically gave me the opportunity to step into whether or not that was true. And one of the people that I'd seen in the plant medicine journey in my awareness showed up in my inbox, and I booked into his energy healing certification. And by the second day, I started to learn that I could channel. I overcame the fear of success, and in the space of overcoming the fear of success, I started to channel, not knowing what on earth was happening. But I from that space, I was essentially just like, okay, I guess there's something about me well beyond what I knew. In the same way, in the psychedelic journey, had opened up something well beyond what I knew. This was another one of those occasions. So I can say more, but I want to give you a chance to kind of reflect or speak about anything, because there's a lot of different parts to this journey.
Well, there is. And one of the beautiful things that I appreciate about you is that you're very transparent and open. And we live in a world where everybody's very nervous about offending somebody, or you have to, if you were use the word language like therapy or healing, people go, oh, as if it's going to offend some part of their perfection, which we're not. We're human, for heaven's sake. So I really appreciate that. And that openness has led you into corporate environments as well, which is where, when I started 17 years ago, podcasting, my aim was really to activate, or not activate, that's a bit arrogant, but to really inspire a higher level of leadership inside companies so that we could start caring about this planet we live on. It's just, in my world, the most spectacular planet we've in the neighborhood. And and we're not treating it all that well. I love animals. They have so much intelligence and wisdom and knowledge, and we tend to think we're the smartest things on the planet while we're trying to figure out how to get off it. So it's a very strange set of contradictions in my mind. So tell me how, when you walk into an environment, what are you getting? Vibes are you getting? What are you picking up on that allows you to know just how to place yourself? Because you're brilliant at doing that. You're brilliant at just knowing, this is it. Can you share a bit about that, please?
Sure. I think for me, it's all in the relatedness of people. So I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just being with someone and seeing what shows up from being with them. Obviously, so much of life these days is virtual. So in a virtual conversation, I'm just allowing myself to connect with their energy and vice versa, and getting curious. Like, the curiosity is a guiding force for me in everything. And the curiosity and my imagination are the kind of two strongest pillars, which have always been there. Even when things were rocky, I've seen that that's always been a kind of the forefront of how I've described how I've created myself. So curiosity is then how I be in conversation as well with others, and getting interested in what it is that they care about. So if I'm in a conversation with someone who owns an organization, it's just a case of really discovering what it is they really care about and what would make a difference to them. And then if it's something which is relevant, I can share with them what might make a difference based on what I do. But it's not a structured process. It's an intuitively guided one by being in the moment, being with people, and just being in conversation and creating that relationship.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of intrigued because I've done plant medicine journey a long time ago, and I didn't have that kind of clear messaging come forward. you don't have to do a plant medicine journey to recognize that there's something deep within that is wanting and yearning to get out. Voice. Can we talk about voice a bit? Because a lot of times there's oppression, there's suppression of voice. Sometimes it's just because of diversity. There's a fear of diversity. I don't want to hear that voice because it's not mine, and I have to be right. So I have to be in those environments where my voice dominates or wins. And then there's the aspect of voice that is just in the expression mode. When I've been through uncertainty and unclear times, then I've gone to podcasting, actually. That's how this whole thing began, because at least there was some way of sharing ideas and thoughts that got all the angst out, but not in a direct way, but more by exploration and learning and so forth. When you were developing or arriving or understanding or accessing your voice, what happened?
Yeah. So the experience of this was quite unusual for me. Like I'd already developed my practice as an energy healer, and then I'd started to discover like, okay, there's a lot of focus in healing on just healing this thing, like almost like fixing a problem. And my approach was always different. My approach was, okay, like if I can get you to peace, what do you want to create from that space of peace? So I would flip things on its head, and I would come from the space of creation and look at what do you want to create, and then look at the different ways we can help you create that. And then what emerged is the ability to use my breath as the vehicle to be able to shift things, not just physically in the body, but also then energetically, as including going back into like the DNA, where someone could connect with a life which was beyond their own timeline and ancestral, and start to clear and heal from that. And so when this emerged with the voice, it was within a session with someone, and basically the experience was extremely odd, and it was confronting, and they said some things which made me feel like, is my body basically still mine? Like, is it now being controlled by someone else? And for about 40 minutes afterwards, I had a concern about that. And the next day I sent them a message, and I just said, I just feel really powerful now. And I didn't really know what that meant. Nothing had transpired within the session to justify that, but something had shifted. And the next time I worked with clients, what I recall, at least because memory is fallible, is that these sound frequencies just started to emerge. And I understand a little bit more about why that happened now, because for a long time, I've probably gone through this idea that, I'm accidentally a spiritualist, or I've only in the last few years have I been engaged in spirituality. But I was working with a psychic this last week who, she worked with people like Michael Jackson, President Obama, these kinds of people. And so she's renowned for her ability to really give guidance, which has made a pivotal difference in humanity. Like, she was responsible for the This Is It album being the title of it. She was responsible for telling President Obama that he was going to become a president and to go in that direction. So her guidance has been influential. So what she told me was essentially, you were spiritually chosen at 5 years old, and you don't need to feign the idea that you were that you didn't have to climb a mountain or anything like this to get there, or figure something out and then look at the top and think, how am I going to get down? It was just a case of, this has always been within you. Like, you were a spiritual teacher and leader in many, many past lives, whether you understand past lives or not. And so you were just, as I see it now, it's just a re-remembering. So what this would have happened in these different occasions, whether it's the psychedelic journey, whether it's the transformational leadership, is just different points of re-remembering who I was. And, all of what we want to create is within us, right? Like, nothing is external to us. We might experience as if it's something out there, which then creates the experience in here, but it's always the opposite. And the illusion of life is that so often it feels like it's outside of us. But when we connect in, we really get to discover some version of us which has actually been trapped in, and now is just waiting to be emerge and to be activated. And she even used the words that you were an activist. Like, you were an activist even in the womb. You were very active in the womb. And I was like, I've never heard someone describe me as an activist in the womb. Or active in the womb means you were activist in life. But it was a fascinating experience to kind of connect all these different threads and to see that what's transpired wasn't an accident. Everything that happened. Like, even one of the words that she says, one of your words she said was philosopher. And I said, and she doesn't know me. She doesn't know anything about my life. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I've let go of the identity of being a philosopher, a few years ago. But I thought, okay, there is an aspect of me which is still this the philosopher being, and is still present. The way I look at the world, the way I can see how systems can be shifted, all of these kinds of ways of being, even the way that I guide within my facilitation. It's drawing on all these different practices which came from 20 years of being a philosopher. So I don't need to deny any of that, but it was just fascinating to see, okay, like all these different threads, which I've kind of said, oh, this, wonder what life would have been like if I'd gone this way. She's like, no, you were being guided to go that way. And so this has been it's a remarkable time that we live in, where we get the chance to remember who we are, and we get to get activated. And I'm very fortunate in that I get to give people the experience of returning to who they are and keep unfolding in these exponential ways where they tap into these quantum fields of intelligence. And it's like the dissolution of the old version of self, like these parts of themselves which haven't been integrated, like disappearing, and then they connect in. It's like, oh, this is what I'm here to do. This is what my legacy is, right? So yeah, I feel really blessed to do this work.
Would you mind sharing with our audience what that sounds like?
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to take a sip of water. Just get...
Good idea.
All right. So for anyone who's listening live or on the replay, what I'm going to guide you in through, I'm probably spend like maybe 5 minutes most. I'm just going to guide you to connect in. So wherever you are in this moment, I invite you to close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, I want you to set an intention. I want you to set an intention that would make a difference on this day. Something which, if that was shifted, if that was created, that would really move the needle in some way. And what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to bring through a frequency which I call a grounding frequency. It's a frequency which I almost imagine this sound is coming from the crust of the earth, and then it wants to emerge slowly up into the ether, into the cosmos, above your crown, and connecting with your higher self. So we're connecting with two forces, this grounding energy, which we need to bring things into material reality, and also an energy which is a higher self, so it's able to connect us with these higher levels of wisdom. So just keep that intention in mind as I bring through this grounding frequency. So as you listen to that frequency, can you hear that, Donna?
I'm looking after my daughter's dog. She's responding to you. I thought I just shut the mic off, but
I got it.
I'm going to get the whole deal here. So
beautiful. So as you listen to that frequency, and so, the dogs can be very sensitive to this. I did a short experience in LA a few days ago where one of the dogs was an emotional support dog, and she was great with it, but the other dogs, they were outside and barking and everything else. So it really depends on where the animal is in their own frequency as to how they experience this. But as you listen to that frequency, you might be feeling somewhere within the body where it feels more spacious, where it feels more light, or you may be feeling somewhere where it feels constrained. Whatever it is perfect. I'm going to start by bringing through a sound which matches onto an emotion that we carry with us deeply as human beings. And that is an emotion around sadness and grief. We tend to carry this, and we tend not to give space for it to be experienced. So this is just going to give you a chance to experience what might be there if there's anything which is relevant in that field. So I'm going to do that for a couple of minutes. So you may be feeling more grounded. You may be feeling that this part of you is more integrated, more allowing. So if there is a part of you that is connecting with that, what I invite you to do now, as you keep your eyes closed, is I want you just to connect in with that part of you that feels held, that wasn't feeling held before. I want you to connect in with love for that part of you, really allowing yourself to pour your love into anywhere it feels more open within the body or around the body. And I'm going to bring through what I call a frequency of love just to amplify that state. You can feel it feels more pristine in just the space that I'm in. So that might mean that it feels more pristine and clearer for you too. And wherever you're at, it's okay. This is just an opening. This is just a chance to connect in, to feel into the energy that's present within you. So now we're going to come back. We're going to expand this frequency of love one more time, and then we're going to come back to that experience of your intention. So now we're going to come back to this intention. What I want you to do is to really connect in. There may be wisdom which is flowing through you. So I'm going to bring through this grounding frequency again. But this time we're coming from this space of this intention that you had at the beginning is already being fulfilled. I want you to connect with this version of self. There's somewhere out there in a unified field, a version of you which has already created exactly what you wanted to create. I want you to experience that. I want you to allow yourself to feel all of that as I bring through this sound. As we wrap this up, what we're going to do now is I want you to come back into the present moment. And from the present moment, as I bring through this final sound, I want you to allow yourself to see anything which would provide a next step or any other wisdom that wants to show itself, which is going to move you from where you are right in this moment to what it is that you saw out in that field of consciousness. So that just gives you a short demonstration of what I call neuro-resonance optimization. This is a frequency which allows us to transmute any challenge of the human condition, to optimize any state, to create whatever it is you want to create in life, and to do it in a way which we can collapse time, where we can condense generations into hours rather than hours into days. So for some of you, that might have really created an opening. For others of you, it may be like something which is a little bit confronting, and whatever it is okay. Feel free to reach out to me if you listened and you want to ask me any questions about anything you just experienced.
I also suggest Sam has on Bandcamp. Sam has a digital album that I've been working with, and it's really lovely. So head over there for On Being, I believe it's called.
Yeah, it's called. What is it called?
I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. It's something around being. I can't.
Yeah.
It's definitely on being though.
Yeah. Sam, that was just beautiful. I'm really curious now. I apologize for Eddie, the dog here, but she's a rescue, and it'll be very interesting to see how she processes this, because in a way we're all rescues.
Sure.
We've all had some kind of emotional, social, energetic damage that is waiting to be brought back into alignment, which is the beauty of the work I see you doing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I've done work with animals at different times, because often they get unsettled. And so usually when I'm working with animals just in the moment, it would just be just connecting with a more soothing tone, as opposed to the higher pitched tones. I think the higher pitched tones, especially because of the acuteness of their hearing, may be a little bit more unsettling for some of them. But I've had many animals who've sat through live sessions and just be completely placid. Dogs and cats. But yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, one of the things that that comes to mind, and I'm very grateful to you for walking us through that, because it makes it real. It really brings home the power and the strength and the just basically the coherence of that unique voice, of those notes that you bring forward. So I imagine if you took this into a company and every single person was speaking their unique note or was expressing it just by ambient radiance, what would be possible with a company like that? I mean, imagine.
Yeah, well, this is what we're looking at, really. We're looking at creating an app which can, revolutionize organizations, because what we've seen is that there's a very old paradigm around flow state, and it's been very successful. And it's a very action-based approach to flow. And it's something like do, and eventually in the side of the doing, you will reach flow. Nothing wrong with that. I've reached that state many times before as an academic and other ways, and exercising and all sorts of things. But it's not the only paradigm. And the paradigm that I've been more interested in is an easeful-based paradigm. And essentially, what we're doing is we're just connecting in energetically, clearing what is in the way. And when you clear what's in the way energetically, you start to activate being in flow. And from being in flow, you can then effortlessly take action from a flow state. Like I've had people who've listened to some of my longer meditations or activations, 15 minutes long, and they've said, they compared it to Joe Dispenza. And Joe Dispenza has obviously done extraordinary work in this field of meditation and spirituality. And they said, one, they couldn't believe it was only 15 minutes long because of what transpired. They said, I've been working on this intention for 5 days, and then that 15 minutes was like, it took me to an entirely different place. I could see a way to actually create what I wanted. And he said, if Joe Dispenza is on the way onto the highway, you're already on the highway, right? It's like the level of consciousness that people might need to be on to be able to connect in would be different. And so we've been exploring that as well. But really, we see an opportunity to be able to create a revolution in flow state, and to make ease, fulfillment, peace of mind, clarity and purpose the norm within the everyday for people, both in organizations, but then also for society at large. Like one of the goals that I have is really to be able to impact 1 billion lives in the next 10 years through frequency. And we're looking at a variety of different spaces where we can bring this technology in to really amplify either existing technology, which there is, or to be able to support organizations, or also the app that I'm in the process of building to be able to support this, because we can do this at the level of the individual, we can do this at the level of relationship, we can do it at the level of organization, and we can do it at the level of society, and we can do it within societal systems. And so that's basically how I look at things, from politics, law, finance, sustainability, healthcare, and then any other kind of challenge that wants to emerge. That's the spaces where we're really playing.
Yeah, it's fractal in character, one self-replicating. I have these little Ukrainian dolls that, as you take them apart, I mean, for anybody that's not sure what fractal is, it's self-similar images replicating. For example, I remember one time finding the image of a lung was also the shape of anyway, I can't even remember now, but it was one of those things where you think, oh, that's perfectly logical. It's a carbon copy of the shape. It's just very different. So yeah, I'm excited by that. I want to introduce you to Patrick Cowden. We'll do that.
Oh, I know Patrick well.
Oh, do you? Oh, there you
Yeah,
go.
I
Okay,
was
that'll
speaking to
be
Patrick just earlier today because we've been talking about how we can bring this into warm space.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and if you don't know of warm space, imagine a platform which brings human connectivity through a digital space, and also helps you connect with flow and flushes out cortisol. Instead of being on Zoom, you're on a platform which really provides that and has protocols which are designed for that. And it's brilliant. I highly encourage you to learn about it if you haven't already. It will be something which is the next Zoom, but at a much deeper, more transformational level.
Yeah, much higher vibration, I would say, much higher vibe. So I thank you. That's wonderful. I'm really I'm really glad to hear this. Can we just go after that incredible experience? I'm a little hesitant to ask the next question, but there's always going to be that place inside somebody who says, no, I'm not. I don't believe in my uniqueness. I don't believe I'm unique. I don't believe that they're very usually black and white thinkers. There's no shades of gray. It's absolute. This is a journey, as you said, and earlier, certainly in my experience, that's what it amounts to as well. What is the key to saying yes in accepting the invitation to become more of who you are?
It's a good question. I think there's a few things. One could be a readiness. Like I wasn't ready to say yes to myself for 2 years, right? And there was a stubbornness which was present, and I'll do it my way. And the I'll do it my way hasn't really ever changed, to be honest. It's just that once I found a new way, that became my way. And so it was the being curious, right? Like, okay, like people are talking about this thing. What is this? Like, what is it that they're so obsessed? Why are they talking about frequency so much? Let me start to explore what I can learn about this from my own vantage point. Because if you look from your own vantage point, you look from the point of view of what you care about, and you can see an access point to what you care about being provided through this modality or any other kind of modality, that's when I think the opening is. When you're trying to hear someone else trying to convince you or persuade you, oh, this is what you need to do, then that's just going to irritate you, because it's essentially going to bring forth the defensive nature of a human self, where you're likely to get reactive. No, I don't need this. This isn't for me. No, I'm great. Glad it's great for you, but it's not for me, right? Like that's the kind of defensive nature. And I spent a long time, in the world where you're more almost persuading or convincing or trying to tell people, oh my God, you've got to experience this. It's amazing. And people don't want a bar of it, and understandably so. And those lessons were brilliant because I could see all of what doesn't work about trying to approach, bring people into something which they are not choosing, right? You've got to be in a space where, okay, I'm choosing this. I'm choosing to actually step into this, rather than feeling like I'm being forced to do this because someone told me I need to do this and I need to get fixed, or I need to go to a therapist, or whatever it is. So I think it's really asking the question, what is it that I really care about? What's really important to me right now? And what are the different concerns and fears and recurring thoughts that I have which show up, which stand in the way of me being able to experience what I care about already? And then writing down, what do I see? What am I actually seeing from this space? Because that in itself can be a revealing exercise for people. I've had so many people who would be like, "Oh my god, just the writing, what I needed to create and what the blocking was just so powerful in itself." Because people don't tend to take the time to do that, because it might seem such an obvious thing to do, or what's holding me back, or what have you. But it's not something we might articulate. So that's the first thing that I would say. And then from looking at that, it's looking at, okay, well, imagine now that this wasn't there. Imagine what life would be like if this wasn't there. What difference would that make to me? What could I create? What could I get done? What might be available? What might I discover about myself if this version of who I think I am actually wasn't true? And then I would look to write that down as well and get connected with that version of who you might be. And start to write out in a way where you get excited about the version of self that you see. And then if you have any skepticism about that, well, that's okay, just be with it. Allow yourself to experience whatever's there around the resistance to that, because that's also part of the journey, is to just notice what's there, right? Notice the self-criticism, notice the resistance, notice the, this is bullshit, or this is a waste of time, and feel into where that energy comes from. And then, if you feel like you've moved through that stage, start to look at, okay, well, what might make a difference? What do I see out there in the world which feels called to me in this exact moment in time, which could support what I'm looking for, right? It could be coaching, could be therapy, it could be psychedelics, it could be breath work, it could be meditation, it could be sound frequencies. There's so many different possibilities that someone could go through, you know? For me, the sound frequencies are interesting because they're able to work at a cellular level. They're able to create safety within the nervous system, which is fundamentally what's needed if you want to create transformation. And they're able to rewire the brain. So people can come in with a belief being one way, and then minutes later be like, oh, that belief is now absurd. Like a favorite example is a guy who came in wanting to create, I think it was $4.5 million in 2 years' time, and he had a subconscious belief that money is poverty. And then within about an hour, money was wealth. And then the vision suddenly expanded to $100 million in 5 years. And I hadn't told him you need to create a $100 million vision or anything like that. It's just, there was an opening within his own energetic field for a much more expansive version of self to come in. I worked with someone this week who was in 180 countries and has been doing this work for 37 years on themselves. Pretty successful, pretty well recognized. But within 5 minutes, we'd expanded what they saw as they were capable of creating 3 times over financially in the next year, just through clearing one of these blocks around money, right? Clearing something which was there energetically. And this person's done a lot of work on themselves. So the space for expansion is really limitless. And what I found is we can tap into whatever emotion is there. We can tap into the frequency which is relevant to you, whether it's a frequency which is from your own timeline, whether it's a frequency which is something which is experienced through your parents, experienced through your ancestors, in the DNA of your cells. We can create a space for that to be honored. When you create that space for it to be honored, that parts of yourself, it creates a space for transmutation. From the space of transmutation, we can then open up more intelligence within your field. So it's tapping into the principles of quantum physics, where you're tapping into unified fields of consciousness, and we're allowing more of your intelligence to come through. So I haven't seen anything which is faster than this. Obviously, I can say I'm biased because I do this, but I've done a lot of different things out there, and it's really blown my mind what I've been gifted to provide for humanity.
I've seen a lot of things out there as well, and that's why you're here, on the program, because it is an absolute accelerator for individuals, for companies. I mean, and to be honest, years ago, I came across the understanding of quantum coherence, and my immediate image was that of a company, because if you can take all these notes that are individuals working in a company, and you can bring them to a state of quantum, where each of them are that unique note, and then together they create this incredible symphonic production, you've got a company that's on track for working with what the kind of world we are in today. And rather than that, the warming up stage where everything is kind of out of sync. So it means, I think from a leadership level, it means a lot of allowing And I think that work starts at that to level, because otherwise it's too easy to say, well, I can't control this, so I need to shut it down. And I can't control it because it scares me. It scares parts of who I am that I've not yet dealt with. That's one of the best reasons to say yes and to step into the work and find out what else you've got underneath the top layer, underneath the veneer, and work with that more directly.
For sure, as you're speaking, like this idea of organizational coherence is huge. And one of the beautiful things about this is whether you're doing this from a distance where someone's not actually even present in the room and having them experience this, or whether you're in an actual room, virtually or physically, you work with one person and you can create transformation for an entire group because you're tapping into this collective consciousness. So, like just before I left LA, my friend's place, there was 8 of us, including their housekeeper, who doesn't speak much English, mostly speaks Spanish. And she was talking about, like, even though I wasn't working with her, I was working with this woman, this business lady. She was talking about how it shifted what she was dealing with around her kids. And it was being translated from Spanish to English by my friend. And then this other woman was experiencing the financial stability in her business from the guidance that we'd got. And then the others were sharing about all the spaces that they were going through. And a couple of them hadn't really done a lot of other kinds of stuff. Like one of them was my friend's brother. He'd done some breath work before. Another was their sister. Probably hasn't done a lot of other things as well. And they were just saying that it's felt so much safety and ease throughout the whole experience. So it's really phenomenal what this can create at the level of collective consciousness. And I think you're exactly right, Donna, when it comes to, if you want to create a company which is coherent, doing it at the level of resonance is a really powerful way. Like I think of the story about like when Google was looking for like who would be the leadership team that went out to Burning Man to find people who are of the similar values. It's like, well, what if you didn't have to find the people of similar values? You actually just got to experience the coming together. Now, yeah, you want to create the recruiting strategy, which is going to allow you to do that. But once you're actually with people, what if you could actually start to see that there is coherence that wants to emerge because we are all just one, right? Energetically, we're all just one. So even our motivations, perhaps they can also start to move towards the collective vision. And this is a beautiful way to really create that collective consciousness. Like one of my visions is, okay, like there are so many different challenges for humanity. Well, and there are so many different approaches we could take, to looking at climate change or looking at poverty or, the housing crisis. So if you get all those experts, like with the X Prize, if you get all of those different people on their boards of trust around the table, and you start to ask them, okay, well, what it is that you're looking to create, and then you start to work with an individual about what their challenges are and allow each of the other person to experience those challenges, it creates the space for transmutation of everyone's challenges to a point where a collective solution might emerge from that space, which could further the whole. And that's really what I'm looking at is, okay, how can we bring this level of coherence in through resonance, which could actually help us solve the world's most challenging problems for humanity? Because that's ultimately why my company, Soul Purpose Leaders, exists.
Yeah. And that's the reason, again, that's the reason why I was so drawn to your work, because that is the work. It is the opportunity that we have. And I can't help but think that, I mean, there's a bunch of layers here for me, but I can't help but think that if we said yes to both the acceptance of the self and at the organizational level, conflict would not be destructive. It would be creatively constructive. And so the kinds of wars we're seeing going on, that's gone, because instead of trying to destroy things with a single button or destroy things with a bunch of, we would just be in a place where we could sit down, cooperate, figure out how to be, like, for example, issues, cross-border issues. Well, let's sit down and figure out how we can work with this in a compassionate way and not in a judgmental, punitive, categorical, black and white kind of way, but in a way that really shows the deepest nature of humanity as it's possible in this world.
I 100% agree with you. Like when people ask me, what do you really care about? I say, I care about a world where war is ended and where people get to experience the freedom that I get to experience and that I get to activate in others. Because that's what I really see as possible. And one of the reasons that I focus on politics as one of my initiatives is because I feel there's so much energy around defensiveness and expenditure on defense, and the strategies are based on that, and they will be perpetual until something else shifts at a level of resonance, because that's the only way you can see when you're in a fear-based mode, is to defend, 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 react, defend, defend. And we could create a future where war is ended if we could really start to lift the resonance of politics, to help them actually see, oh, there is a different pathway to having exactly what you want, to being trusted, to creating the level of impact and legacy that you'd love ideally to do, or even came into politics to do, but then found that there wasn't actually the opportunity once you actually saw all the guardrails that were designed within the system of winning and not losing, right? So we get to create an entirely different relationship to what politics can be, and as a consequence, different kind of political leaders which are actually effective, right? Including making existing political leaders more effective, because just in the same way that human beings can be ineffective and then they can become effective through forms of transformation, the same is true for politicians. So I really like to bring the humanity back to all of these organizations where we take it away because we pigeonhole someone because, oh, that's their role, they're a politician, therefore they can't be trusted, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, great, that's your perception. Beautiful. Now let's see if we can connect with the humanity of this human being who, underneath the skin suit of their role, actually has a heart and actually probably has some decent reasons why they actually wanted to be in this in the first place. And I was chatting to someone recently who's been in politics for 25 years as a consultant, and they said, there are very few sociopaths in politics. It's beyond what people actually experience. And I thought, that's interesting. That's a way of listening which is distinct from how a lot of people listen, where it's like, oh, most politicians are sociopaths. It's like, okay, the way you're listening creates then the resonance of what we get to experience in politics. The more you listen as all politicians are sociopaths, the more we create a world where we get to experience sociopathic politicians. The more you shift into, oh, these people are just trying to do their best, and maybe they're misguided and they've got some errant ways about going about it. Well, there's actually a space for something to improve, rather than we're stuck with these people and this is all effed up. So I tend to take a more optimistic approach to things, rather than listening from a very limited place.
Yeah, no, I love that. I also think that well, I'll give you an example, a story that I'll go to, and that is I worked in Ottawa in Canada. I'm in Canada, so I worked in Ottawa for 7 years, and in the course of that, I'd be on the plane. So I was in management role, so I'd be on a plane going back and forth. Sat beside a pig farmer, who became ran and got his seat, and he's working in Ottawa, flying back and forth from his pig farm. And he said, I did this because I really wanted to make a difference. I thought if I got to Ottawa, I could make a difference. And he says, I get there, I have no power at all. It's all run by the middle managers. And so it's all a big joke. And what's interesting about that was, I think there's a point where we are now politically where there's a complete redesign of the system required in order to elicit a higher level of conversation and decision making. Because the way it is now, polarization is way too easy. It's the go-to formula for making sure we don't deal with the real issues. We just sort of one imposes another on another, and there's good ideas sitting on both sides, but they're not being heard. There's not that mix where you can actually have those conversations and start to benefit from those differences and diversity. So I'm wondering, if I look at it that way, and we look at the political structures the way they are worldwide, this whole business of autocracy is a convenient way of saying, well, I don't want to, this is just an opinion, obviously. I don't really want to do the work that would allow us to sit down and figure things out collectively. What are you seeing in the evolution of political systems? That's a small question.
I think one of the things I've been seeing is that a change-based approach to politics is unlikely to work, because it's the same as trying to change a human being. It has the same defensive characteristics of reacting. You want to change the system? Okay, the system is going to notice that, and it's going to repel against what you're trying to do. So if you're going to actually create a shift within a system itself, you've got to do it in a way which is in alignment with the system. And that comes by allowing the shift in alignment to come from within. The shift in alignment to come from within those who are within the system. And then for the energy of that, for them to have the impetus to want to actually reshape the system from what they've seen is now possible. If it tries to come from outside of that, it's going to be much more challenging. And I think this is where people have tended to go wrong in history. They've kept constantly trying to change systems and then wondered why they kept the same results. And I spent a lot of time looking at legal change, political change, looking at the way that responded to social norms and all this kind of stuff, looking at the nature of all of it, looking at the way that interest interacts with politics, how governments go about, and I constantly would see these aspects. But now I'm looking at it from a very different vantage point, and from the vantage point that I look at it now, it's like, okay, yeah, there's just needs to be a shift in resonance. If you shift the resonant frequency from fear and scarcity to one which is at a higher level of consciousness, to love, peace, and abundance, then that will tap into higher levels of wisdom, higher levels of consciousness. As a consequence of that, you will see different kinds of policies being made. You will see different kinds of laws being made. You'll see different actions being created. You'll see different kinds of leaders emerging in the political space. You'll set up different structures within the political systems to support the higher frequency that people are coming from as a consequence. So it'll be an emergent experience is what I would imagine, rather than it being like a forced into, we need to change the system doesn't work, the system is bankrupt, or whatever it is that we would normally want to characterize the political system as, rather than, well, the system is a system, and now we're seeing a different pathway. We're seeing a different way to go forward, right? And it's an iteration of something rather than just like tearing it up and throwing it away and discarding with it. Like, this was useless, this never had it, this, just doesn't respond to our problems of humanity. It's like, yeah, great. But that approach is less likely to be successful, as I sense. You've got to be more sensitive to the system as almost like a human entity. And if you can be more sensitive to the system like a human entity, then it has the space to be heard, to be seen in the same way that you want to be heard and be seen. And from that place, we can start to create the space for transmutation of what's in the way, and then actually start to connect in with a higher level of consciousness to create an emergent system which is corresponding to the needs and desires of the 21st century.
Wow, that's a wonderful way to conclude our conversation today. That's just, because really it's the shift from wanting to control the outer world into just, setting up the conditions for a new world to emerge. That's how I would interpret that, or how I would hear that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, awareness of filters, awareness of what filters you're bringing to the listening, being able to sit back, reflect, question yourself, ask big questions that you don't have the answer to. Those are the kinds of opportunities, I think, to really expand thinking and move it to a higher level. Can we leave listeners with a big question that would be good to, I call it noodling, but it's that, walk in the bush, doing some reflective work that would hopefully open up some opportunity to sort of say, well, maybe things aren't as bleak as they appear, or as difficult as they appear. And where do I fit? I feel helpless and powerless because there's AI taking over my job. All of this kind of chatter that's running in the background and permeating people's awareness at this point in time. If we could replace that with a question that will expand it and open it up, and by we, I mean you,
Sure.
It would be appreciated. I think that's a nice way to pull it together.
So I've often spoken about 2025 as a tipping point for the consciousness of humanity. And people have different views as to whether it's 2025 or the next 2 years. But whatever it is, we're seeing a radical shift in the way that humanity's going. Like, a few years ago, sound frequencies would have been a bit like, what are you talking about? Whereas now it's becoming much more commonplace like we see on Facebook. Oh, I'm making a documentary on frequencies. Who do I need to know? And people will tag me in the post as someone that is relevant to hear from, right? So this shift is happening at such a fast rate. And so the question I would ask is, if 2025 was a tipping point for the consciousness of humanity even, what unique role do you see your way of seeing the world, whether it's a linear or a non-linear approach, can play in shaping this radically different future?
Love it. I'll put that one in the show notes as well, because that's one definitely worth reflecting on. This is the time where we're not reliant on others to solve problems, where we can get together and solve them collectively. but with compassion and not judgment. And I think the way you frame that is an opening for people to take and really do that reflective work themselves. We'll also put, Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about Soul Journey and some of the other stuff you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So the company I have is called Soul Purpose Leaders, and as I said before, we're really working on how can we solve the most challenging problems for humanity. So there's a project that I'm working on which is around an emergent transformational healthcare system to differentiate itself from the existing healthcare system. There is the building of conscious cities within that project. There is the emergence of potential for 5D hospitals, consciousness hospitals which come from high degrees of consciousness. There's work that I'm doing around the transformation of politics. There's work I'm doing on sustainability. So I love projects where there is the opportunity to make this just beautiful difference to what humanity can be. And so we really focus on the leaders and organizations who are committed to bring forth that future. And we support them in collapsing time, in bringing those audacious visions that they have to life, both from the macro point of view of like, what is the big vision that you've got? And then the actual micro point of view of how do we actually implement this? How do we create the aligned strategy energetically within you, which isn't based on figuring it out, but actually just connecting in with your highest intelligence to allow it to work seamlessly, right? And so we really work with those kind of leaders who are already making a big difference to humanity, and they want to expand that even further. They're the kind of people who they go to sleep and they're thinking about, this vision for humanity. They wake up and the first thing that probably is on their heart is the difference they're going to make today. And then, the other things I can share is, as Donna said, we have there's a short album which people can purchase at the moment with Listening to Smile on Bandcamp, and we have different kinds of opportunities for people to work with us depending on where they are in their journey, from our what's called our Soul Purpose Accelerator to much more expansive programs. And if there's something which has resonated with you, or if you experienced the short activation and felt called to want to reach out to me, then you can do so either through LinkedIn or email. My email is sam@soulpurposeleaders.com, or you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. So you can find me pretty easily because there is only one Sam Kukathas in the world. So you can either stalk me or you can find me, whichever one you're really looking for. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation, Donna. Appreciate you, and appreciate everyone who's had a chance to listen.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how grateful I am. Sam, I'm going to turn your camera off because I just want to give a quick message to the audience, and then I'll come back to you.
Absolutely.
So if you enjoyed this program, if you found inspiration from it, please share it. We're trying to, when I say we, I mean collectively, there's a lot of people who are trying to really set the conditions for transformational change in a very good way on the planet. And so please share it. Please like and please subscribe to all of those things. And I also invite you to tell other people about it and take the steps forward that allow you to use your voice in the most true and aligned way that you have available to you. My name is Donna Jones, and thank you.